in the next 15 minutes or so having a look at that together. Well, no room at the inn might have been the problem in the first century for Mary and Joseph in the busyness of Bethlehem. But it's not really our problem, is it? Busyness in Bedford, well, that is a problem. No room not at the inn, but no room at Tesco's. No room in the car park. No room in the town centre car parks. No room in the shops. That's more of our problem, isn't it? And you might be thinking in the build-up to Christmas, peace? Peace at Christmas? Is it really possible? Chance would be a fine thing. Or what about Christmas morning itself? You know, your kids who you cannot get up for school Monday to Friday, 39 weeks a year, come Christmas morning, whatever day of the week it is, 4 a.m. Mum, Dad, it's Christmas. Oh, I know. Go back to bed. You know the day's going to get manic. You just want a few more hours peace in your bed. Peace on Christmas morning? A chance would be a fine thing. Even if we go from the personal to the global, we still see no peace, do we? 1918, the end of World War I. It was considered the war to end all wars. Well, nearly 100 years of history says something quite different, doesn't it? There was the Second World War, and there have been wars ever since, and there are wars today, as we know from our news each day. Peace in Ukraine, peace in Israel, peace in Gaza this Christmas. You know, really, the chance would be being longing for, wouldn't it? But it just doesn't seem realistic at the minute. If this world, as many claim to be, is simply an accident of evolution, you know, atoms banging around in space that happen to collide at one point and then this happened and that accident happened and then suddenly we've got life, if that's all there is, and the narrative that comes from it, the survival of the fittest, well, if that's what this grand narrative of life is, then there really is no hope for peace at Christmas. You may remember a few years ago that this advert that will come up on screen across London buses was paid for by the Atheist Society. If you can read it, it says, "There is probably no God, so don't worry, enjoy yourself." That was their story that they were wanting the nation to know. Well, apart from wrongly making out God to be a bit of a killjoy, it's not much of a narrative, is it? It's simply kind of survival of the fittest. And if my enjoyment of life, which is what I have to live for, well, if that happens to trample on somebody else, well, so be it. Because it's about me and my happiness. It's not much of a recipe for life, for peace. It's not much of a narrative for the world that's going to bring the peace that we so want. But then there's another narrative as well. And this came out about the same time. The Christians, in response to the atheists, decided that they were going to put some adverts on London buses. And they said, there probably is a God, so don't worry. Now there's a more hopeful narrative. A narrative that says there is a God who loves us, who made this world and made us to take care of it, and despite our rejection of him, doesn't abandon us, doesn't strike us dead, but comes into the world to rescue us and to give us the peace personally that we want and globally that we need. Now there's a different narrative. There's a narrative, a story I can live by, one I want to find out more about. Can I look at the next slide, please? You see, here, with just one of our readings, is the world we so want, isn't it? God to this prophet, this spokesperson, this preacher Isaiah, 8th century BC, said, "See, I create a new heavens and earth. The sound of weeping and crying will be no more." Isn't that what we long for? Isn't that speaking of peace, not war? Never again will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. 100 years would be thought of as a mere child. No, it's poetic language, but I think you get the point. This is a world that will continue to go on forever. This is peace revved up to the max. This is life forever in a world of peace. Isn't this a better narrative than there is probably no God? Isn't this a better narrative than survival of the fittest? But let's push in a bit more. How can such a world come about? Okay, sure, it's a world we long for, but isn't it just a bit kind of fairy tale stuff? No. Quite right. And Isaiah goes on to tell us how this world will come about. But he doesn't say it will be through governments or the United Nations or any political organisation. I'm, as many people know, a bit of a rugby fanatic, and 2023 is a great year, as is every 4 years, because it's the Rugby World Cup. And one of the wonderful kind of tales, I think, that came out of the Rugby World Cup was the Irish fans. At the end of every game, and of course their fans flocked in the tens of thousands to all the games, they'd win the game and you'd hear the old song from the 1990s from the Cranberries, Zombie. Dolores O'Riordan, or the late Dolores O'Riordan, wrote a wonderful song. And to hear tens of thousands of fans sort of reinventing it almost sort of 20, 30 years on was wonderful. But it's a song that actually speaks about war. You see, being Irish, we knew of the IRA, and she wrote the song in response to 2 bombs that the IRA had placed in bins in the city of Warrington. 2 bombs that exploded and killed 2 children. Well, we might have thought the IRA was a thing of the past. You know, politics has won the day. We can have peace through politics, but then this year there was the attempted murder of Detective John Caldwell. He was just putting the footballs back in his car boot after helping his son's training session when 2 guys came with bullets towards him, claiming to be members of the new IRA. Peace through politics? Maybe not. Look at the words of this song, Zombie, from Dolores O'Riordan, from the Cranberries. So that last bit with their tanks and their bombs and their guns, they're dying. This is a world without peace. This is a world that is crying out for peace but can't find it. So if it's not going to come about through governments or politics, well, how can this world come about? Well, God tells us through the prophet Isaiah. And it's remarkable. If you've got your Bibles, go to Isaiah chapter 9, where we had read to us. Chapter 9 and verse 6. And you'll see remarkably the answer to this peace we so want is a child. A son who will be born. That just seems remarkable, doesn't it? Governments can't do it. Politics can't. But a child can? Well, how? Well, how is this possible? Well, just look at that last line of verse 7. It says the zeal or the passion or the jealousy of God will achieve this. You see, God is so invested in his people that he made that he's not going to just let go of us. He is going to act to bring about peace through this son, this child to be born. And then we have those 4 titles that we had read. Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Wonderful Counselor. They're not just random titles. If you like, they're his credentials. It's a job description. That's how he will bring the peace to this world that we so want. Well, let's just tap into those for a few minutes. First of all, he's going to be the Wonderful Counselor. Now, I don't think in terms of earthly counselors that we go to see to when we need to have talking therapy. No, this is someone supernatural in wisdom. This is someone who always makes the right decisions and is always caring and compassionate when making those decisions. He never does wrong. He has the wisdom to always make the just right choices. Maybe this is the answer to the peace that we so want and need. And what's remarkable is that he offers this wisdom to anybody, to you and to me. If we're willing to trust him and say, yeah, I need this wisdom, he offers it to us. Maybe this child to be born is the solution to our peace that we need. Well, secondly, we're told that he's mighty God, and then thirdly, Prince of Peace. Let's put those two together. You might start thinking, mighty God, this is a muscular kind of guy. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger ramped up a bit more. And here is someone with great muscle, great power. You want to look like that, don't you? Maybe that's the answer to our peace. Maybe that's the image you have when we hear might and strength and power. But this son's strength, even as a child, is far greater than anything Arnie could ever do. Because he has the power and the strength to rescue you from sin, to rescue you from slavery, from your self-imposed slavery that means you have no peace. Let's just go back to our evolutionary narrative for a minute, for that survival of the fittest. Let's say that you consistently lived by it. You consistently lived that life that has my enjoyment at all costs at the centre of it. And let's say you do that for a while and you go through that and you buy everything you want, you get rid of people that you don't want, and you think this is going to buy me my happiness. But after a while you've discovered that actually you still haven't really got that inner peace that you so want. You're not actually as happy as you thought you would be by being able to live like this. Well, what have you achieved? Well, you're not happy yourself, and you've probably made a lot of other people pretty miserable through your own desire for happiness at their expense. But it's worse than that, because you've forgotten and rejected the God who made you. The God who wants to bring you peace in the first place, you've shrugged off. You've said, he's irrelevant. He can't help me. You haven't achieved much at all, have you? You can't find the peace. You've ruined yourself. You've ruined others. And you're trapped. It's like you're enslaved to your own desire for happiness and peace, but you can't find it and you can't get out of it. A few years ago when we were living in New Zealand, I went out for a walk with some friends of mine. It was a nice Sunday afternoon in winter, so there wasn't a lot of light, but it was just it should have been a few hours walk. And the first part was great, walking through the trees, through the forest, through the bush, through there, and then we'd come back along a track between the cliffs on one side and the swamps and the sea on the other. Can I just see the picture of it? There we go. Lovely place to go. Right? All that brown stuff is just swamps. Don't go into it unless you want to kind of sink. So this track back we're following is fine to start with. And then slowly but surely it kind of peters out. Just a bit of sand, and then we kind of find ourselves kind of bashing through the bush and the scrub to try and make it back to where we were, the other side of those cliffs. But then darkness began to fall and we couldn't really see where we were going. You could only see the bush in front of you. And we had no phone reception, so we couldn't tell anyone. And suddenly that nice Sunday afternoon walk is becoming very unpeace-like. Fear is taking over the group. The chatting that there was has turned to kind of quietness as we're all kind of worrying about what's going to happen. And we're worrying about our families back home because no one can contact them. And they must be panicking because darkness is well and truly come by now. And we thought, well, are we just going to be another statistic on the kind of national website? More people going missing in national parks. Fear had taken over. There was no peace. But then we heard a sound in the sky. And a light. And then the sound got louder and the light got louder and we could see that it was a helicopter that landed just in front of us. Unbeknown to us, a phone call had been made from back home and the police had come out in search and rescue with a helicopter. Suddenly, fear had gone, peace had come. We'd been rescued and we were helicoptered to safety. But what about our families back home? How will they know we're safe? And they said, don't worry, we've contacted head office and they'll ring home. Fear and restlessness had gone. Peace had taken over. We'd been rescued from the trap. Friends, that's just a small picture of the rescue that this son, this child is going to do. Not from a mountain scene or from a bush, but from the slavery to sin. The peace we cannot find is what this son, this child, has come to rescue us from. That's why his third title was indeed the Prince of Peace. Because he gives us that peace that we so want, that we seem to find so hard to come by. And then finally, he's called Everlasting Father. He has those perfect father-like qualities, even as a child, caring, compassionate. He's the person you'd always want to be around. He'd give you that arm around the shoulder whenever you were in trouble. Compassionate for the anxious, tender-hearted for those without peace. And because he's the everlasting Father, he's as approachable today for you and I as he was when this was written 2,500 years ago. You see, the great news of Christmas is that this son, this child has been born. This supernatural wisdom is available. Mighty God has indeed broken in through his son, who is also mighty God and Prince of Peace. And he's begun that rescue. He's already transformed millions of people's lives and given them the peace that they found so hard to come by. And because he's broken into this world, we can be assured that that world that we all want, that we saw before, the world of peace, the world of no more crying and no more death, we can be certain that that will come about because God has already begun his rescue plan through this son. And so the future is guaranteed on the basis of his past intervention. And in the meantime, we can find that peace that we so want today. We don't need to keep on searching, finding some professor or guru or some latest bestseller. We simply need to look at the child, the son who was born, who grew up and died on the cross so that we don't have to pay for our sins, so that we can find that peace in Jesus. So if you're longing for peace, if you haven't found it, if you're restless inside, stop looking. Consider Jesus. In the new year, we're running a 3-week course called Hope Explored, where you can find out more about this peace that we all so long for. If anything I've said has struck a chord with you or you're interested more, please do come along. Take one of these flyers. Speak to me. Send an email to the address on here. We'd love to have you along. But just remember, this Christmas, today, we can find peace through this child, Jesus. Let me pray.